Good morning. This is Daniel Posney, and this morning we're going to continue on with my story. And I feel like some of my story can really help to kind of give some background about where I came from and what my path has been and how I move through things. So we'll start with I am an identical twin, and I have a brother named Ken, and he's an awesome guy. He lives in Kauai, and he's my favorite brother. My only brother. Anyway, he's a great guy. And let's see, we were born in Baldwin Hills, California, which is LA County. And the part that I remember about being that young is we lived in Long Beach and San Fernando Valley in a place called Reseda. And I remember it being really hot. I remember my mom taking us on our bicycles to the park. I remember we lived in Pine Tree, or we went to Pine Tree Elementary School. I remember Jack LaLanne being really popular back then. I remember he had a yellow Schwinn banana split bicycle with the banana seat and the sissy bar and all that stuff. And I remember my dad building us a go-kart in the garage. And we had a backyard, and my dad built us just the frame of a house, like a kid's house. And I don't know if he built just the frame because he couldn't finish the whole thing, but all we needed was the frame. It's like, you get a little baby or a dog or something, and you get them a box. And sometimes the box is a better toy than any other toy you're going to spend $100 on. So we spent a lot of time there. And I remember jumping off the roof. I don't know why I was on the roof. And I remember spraying some model spray paint in my mouth because I was looking at the can, and I pressed the button at the same time that I went and of course we had to call the paramedics and all that, so that was a big deal. I remember my dad working a lot. I remember us having a brand new Land Rover. My mom and dad traveled to Fresno, California. It was a long drive, and they went to the dealership and they bought a brand new, I think it was a early 70s Land Rover. And we took that Land Rover, it seemed like every year, to Yosemite. And it was very bouncy. It didn't have any safety belts. And it was very, no frills kind of car. And we all loved it. I remember my dad waking us up at 4 o'clock in the morning, putting us in the back of the Land Rover. And we would leave for Yosemite, and we'd get there around noontime or something. I remember my dad being very much like he would take us go-kart riding. He would do things with us that maybe my mom didn't really want us doing, things that she felt weren't really safe. And he fixed the Land Rover. He mowed the lawn. His brothers-in-law were all sheriffs. And I remember all that, this masculine energy and, shooting guns at 4th of July and stuff like that. But he was also the one that we kissed goodnight. And it's just kind of the way it was. We'd all lie down in front of the TV and watch Walt Disney or Wild Kingdom or one of these shows, and then okay, it's time to go to bed, and then we'd kiss Dad goodnight, and then we'd say goodnight to Mom, and go to bed. And I remember my life being pretty happy. I don't remember too many. I remember maybe one or two arguments that my mom and dad had, but I remember being pretty happy. I remember going to the beach in Orange County, Laguna Beach, Corona del Mar, Dana Point, Aliso Beach, all those wonderful places. I remember really enjoying that. It seemed like probably about 15, 20 miles driving to get to the beach, but it seemed like we were there a bit. Um, I had a great relationship with my brother and my sister. Of course, just like brothers and sisters, you fight. And I remember I have this strong memory in my mind. My sister is sitting in the Ethan Allen chair, the big chair, and she's got her claws out. And I remember my brother and I were attacking her, pinching her or hitting her. I don't know what we're doing, but she was got her feet stuck out there and clawing at us. I remember getting clawed a couple times. But besides that, we all loved each other. You know, it was, maybe it was like the the twins against, my sister because we could double up on her, and that wasn't very fair. And I'm sure she felt some of that, you know, she kind of loved us and hated us, maybe, they're really cute brothers to have, and they're pain in the ass sometimes. So I remember spending some time with my granddad, my grandma, and hanging out with them. And that was in Long Beach. We did a lot of traveling. I remember we moved quite a bit, and it seems like we moved to about, by the time I was an adult, I moved about 13 times. And my dad was an engineer, and he worked for a couple different companies. Bertea and Parker Hannifin were two big companies that were involved in the NASA space shuttle. And so he was a machinist, but my dad was so many other things too. He was a cook at Love's Restaurant, which we love because of all the ribs. He also had a business where he made Naugahyde boat seats for racing boats. And he and my mom managed a Mother Butler's Pies restaurant. And so he did a lot of different things. I remember that kind of inspired me to try different things and do different things. Later on, I had to resolve that, figure out who I really am beyond doing everything. But that was a really good inspiration for me. Uh, I guess my relationship with my mom and my dad was really good. I guess I just wanted more time with my dad too, because mom was there for sure, but she wasn't emotionally there. We didn't have a mom that could get to emotional affection and tickling and hugging and I love yous and that kind of thing. Just learning later, it's just not where she could get to. And she had her own trauma that kind of blocked that. And my dad could, but then, my dad's working two jobs all the time. And it seemed like I only saw him on the weekends. So when the weekends came, we went to the beach or we went camping or we did something. That's what it seemed like, at least. So, but I also know that, a lot of my childhood around the house was, everybody did chores. And my brother had the backyard, I had the front yard, and we'd swap, and we had laundry, and we had dishes, and we had bathrooms, and we had bedrooms, and um, all that stuff. I remember being in the backyard, all of us as a family, and pulling weeds. And I remember us pulling some weeds, and you got these three-pronged weeds. I forget what they're called, but my dad grabbed one, and it turned out to be a pheasant stuck upside down by our dogs that had attacked a pheasant that got over the wall from next door. So this neighbor had these pheasants, and the pheasant got out of the cage, got into our yard while we were gone on the weekend, and we saw some feathers on the yard, but we didn't know what it was. We just didn't think anything of it, and we started pulling weeds, and we found this dead pheasant. But we always had dogs. Ever since I remember being a little kid, we always had at least a couple dogs all the time. And my mom and dad really loved Cairn Terriers, like the dog in Wizard of Oz, Toto. We always had those. I remember we had a golden retriever, a Labrador retriever, a couple labs, poodles, all kinds. Never had any cats, but we always had dogs. I remember loving riding my bicycle and being out on my own, of course, hanging out with my brother. Um, it's one of those things when you have a twin brother or a brother that's pretty close in your age. It's great to have, and it's also you're kind of stuck with them too. When sometimes you don't want to be around each other, and you want to have your own friends, and that's not possible because you got the same friends. So I spent a little bit of my time wondering, who am I beyond being the twins, the Posney twins? And I guess I wanted my sovereignty. So that was to come, but that was something that I was working on. So we moved around a bit. And all the time that we were um, kids, we had these pictures up on our wall in the living room, probably every room in the house, of lions and zebras and rhinoceros and cheetah, and you know they were all over the house. In fact, our dogs, our Cairn Terriers, were named Swahili names. I remember one was Todo Kufaru, which means little rhinoceros, and Mabili, which means two, because we had two. That was the second Karen Terrier. And we were just really engaged in that and just really passionate about that. My mom and dad had this dream of going to Africa before we were born. So that's why my dad was working two jobs. And I guess, what I get from that is that was very a great dream that they had. But looking back at it on it now, I would have gladly given up that trip to Africa had he lived. And so he died while he was either on the way from or to one of his jobs, and he was killed in a car accident. I guess he hit a telephone pole. And my dad had propensity to fall asleep at the wheel, and I laugh because I'm just laughing at the times my mom used to, nudge him while we were on the way to Yosemite. He's falling asleep at the wheel, and my mom, Glenn, wake up, wake up. And that's probably what happened. So I would give up that whole trip to Africa and Europe and everything just to have my dad back, of course. But it was a great dream to have. And just to tell you how it ends, we did end up going to Africa and Scotland and London and Austria and Denmark, and it was an amazing trip. Of course, I didn't realize I was there until I came back home, but it was an amazing trip that really kind of gave me something to talk about, gave me something to build some character, and kind of differentiated us kids from other kids a little bit. And that probably really, maybe that was the boost that we really needed. So that was a really powerful time. 1976 is when we went, and that was a different time to be in Africa and different time to be in Europe. But back to childhood, back to along the way, we lived near Disneyland a mile away, and we used to sit up on the wall and watch the fireworks. And then we lived about a mile away from Knott's Berry Farm. I don't know what the deal with that whole thing was, but we lived in a town called Buena Park, and of course Long Beach. And yeah, I just remember just being a pretty happy kid. And I do remember being like there was something different about me. And I remember my mom telling me that I had wrote her a letter. I think it was after my dad had passed, and it really struck her as I was something. I was barely probably 12 years old or something, and I was telling her that everything's going to be okay, and I had all this wisdom in this letter. And I remember realizing that although I was a twin and I'm in this family, there's something different about me. I look at the world differently, and I don't know what that is. And all I could equate that to is maybe I'm going to be someone special. Maybe I'm going to be in a rock band and we're going to be so famous. Or maybe I'm going to invent something and I'm going to be really wealthy. Or maybe I'm going to become president. I'm going to, fix the world. And it was, it's all I knew is what, those kind of three things. But little did I know that I was going to go on this journey, on this path that is completely different, and eventually be able to have an effect on people's lives. And I never could have seen that back then. And no one could have told that to me. So I just needed to kind of find my way and wander about a little bit. And I guess I liked that back then, is I liked wandering. I liked exploring things for myself. And I always had this connection with plants and animals, and feeling like I could telepathically or telekinetically bring that glass across the table or bend that spoon. I always thought about psychic abilities, and I don't know where that came from. I don't know what show I watched, and I don't think that came from my parents or anything. It was just something that was inside of me, I guess. And I also always had a real desire to connect with indigenous or Native American wisdom, way of living, clothing, whatever I can get my hands on. And I remember actually practicing sneak up, like to sneak up on somebody. And, there's this dance called the sneak up dance. And I was probably heard that and go, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I remember climbing trees and really enjoying being up at the top of the tree and watching people walk below, knowing that they didn't know that I was there. And it was just a really cool feeling to, like, to this day, if I'm playing paintball or something, I like hiding in the background, letting everybody get shot, and then I come out victorious, or no one even knew I was standing right there. So, probably like sniper is a pretty good um, category for me to just stay hidden like that. Well, let's see. A lot of beach time, a lot of camping, a lot of going to Yosemite, a lot of driving the Land Rover everywhere, going up these trails, these bumpy trails in that Land Rover, and just learning from my dad, learning from him how to work on cars, and actually not the actual work, the technique or the process, but just having the confidence. I think it really struck me that he would order parts from England, receive them, and then repair it himself. That really, oh wow, you can do that. And then, he built his toolbox, or he built his thing in the garage to hang his tools. And, so I built my toolbox. And so when it came time for us to build a skateboard ramp, we built a skateboard ramp in the garage. And it seemed like we were always building things. And I guess I did learn that from my dad. I did learn trying different things. And, I remember being in high school. I guess this is after my dad passed. And my brother and I went out for the football team. I guess because my sister was friends with so we had a lot of Samoans in the high school. Well, we had a lot of Mexicans too, and there was a big Mexican gang, not Mexican, Hispanic, and it was pretty hard for some people to protect themselves and stuff. It was pretty wasn't that safe. And so with my sister having Samoan friends, these guys are huge and they're all on the football team and they're all these varsity players and stuff. There's big old fro on their heads. And so since they were friends of my sisters, all the gang bangers all kind of knew that um, I was under their protection. So for some reason, we went out for the football team, and we were just, they didn't even have a uniform that would fit us. We were so small. So I remember kind of going through Hell Week and then figuring this probably isn't, I'm gonna just pass. But that I think I got that from my dad about just, trying different things and just going for it, and um, yeah, not being shy about trying different things. So that really helped. Let's see. Reaching back here, looking at my memories. Yeah, I remember. Well, here we come to the part. I remember being next door at my friend's house. We had the Linkers next door. That was the time when you could, you would just walk down the street and knock on someone's door, and you would pretty much know everyone or say hi to everyone on your street. We used to live. There was like this dead end street, and on the other end of that wall was Two Guys. Two Guys was like a Target. So we would hang out at different. We'd all kind of come out of our houses and go play tag and ride our bicycles. And you know, there's this one kid that was a real bully, and we'd have to watch out for him. And there was a adult. There was this couple. The guy had this really cool Ford Bronco. It was all beefed up and stuff. He was a glass blower for Disneyland. And so we used to hang out at his house, and his name was Wade, I think. And he had a really cute wife. And we had this nice elderly couple across the street, and they would always win the most beautiful house in Garden Grove, which is where we lived at the time. And my next door neighbor, Randy, had a raccoon as a pet. I don't know, it just sounds like some kind of Stand By Me movie or something when you talk about it. It was much different. We had these friends across the street. His name was Grape 8. 'Cause we called him Great. His name was John, but we called him Great Big because he was so big. He was a Panamanian guy. You know, he had the big fro and big body, and he was older than us, so he could get beer and cigarettes. And so we hang out at his house and hang out in the garage. And he had a pool, and you know, you think about all the stuff we used to do, and we used to ride our bicycles. At that time, we used to ride our bicycles about 20 miles from Garden Grove to Irvine to go ride our bicycles. You know, we'd pick up some cigarettes somewhere and some beef jerky and some candy, and then we'd go to Irvine and go ride our bikes around and smoke cigarettes and rent a rowboat at the lake out there. And God, what a time of just exploring. And you know, you go into people's houses, you hang out in their backyard, and this person's got a pool, and you invite yourself over. You know, we had, of course, we had phones, but there wasn't any cell phones, there wasn't any computers. So when you wanted to hang out with someone, you just went up to the door and knocked on the door, and they're probably just hanging out. So they go, "Yeah, let's go ride our bikes." It just seems so odd nowadays to do something like that. But everybody kind of knew each other, and we kind of knew someone at least, you know, a couple blocks away from our own home. You knew the neighbors about that far away. I remember, I think it was, yeah, it was before my dad passed. I remember I was in sixth grade or something, and there was this couple of tough kids, Rex and Casey, and you know, they had their own rough childhood and rough home life because they were always bullying me, or at least, you know, one of them was. I remember being in the bathroom and this guy came in and he started to pick on me. And I remember using comedy to get myself out of it. Everything he would say, I would say something smart ass. And I would, you know, kind of joke my way out of it. And I remember him kind of going, "You're just weird," or something. And it just kind of shocked him enough to not beat me up. And then one day after school, um, or yeah, just before we ended school, this guy Casey came up to me and he said, um, "I heard you called me an asshole." And I was like, "I did not call you an asshole," because he was this bigger, you know, heavyweight kid. And he says, "Well, I'm going to kick your ass after school." And I was, oh man, how can I get? I don't know how to fight. You know, my dad hasn't taught me how to fight, and I don't know how to deal with this. And I'm, you know, back then, I'm just a sweet kid that's just kind of trying to get good in school and be the part in the play. You know, and here I'm, you know, there's this thing that's in front of me and I don't know how to deal with it. And I was just completely shocked. And I went outside the gate and I was hoping to make it home. I only lived about 2 blocks away. And Casey and this guy Rex came out to, you know, fight me. And Casey just, and I heard that he was taking martial arts too on top of that. And he just started to mouth off to me and trying to egg me on and stuff and said, "I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you." And he punched me in the stomach, and it just knocked the wind out of me. And I just started tearing up, and I just that you know I was one of the most helpless points of my life. I think in my childhood, just being there in front of this big kid with no one supporting me. It was a very traumatic time. I mean, I'm getting emotional just talking about it. And he just looked at me, and he didn't punch me again. He just punched me that one time, and I think I just started to cry, and he let me walk away. And I don't think I told anybody about that, but I felt kind of sad for him too, that he would need to pick on someone like me. And then I thought about it as the years went by, and something really terrible happened to him. Something really traumatic happened to him, and then it caused him to kind of go down that road. And then the last I heard that he was spending some time in prison. And to this day, I just have a lot of compassion for him. And you know, I hope he knows that he's completely forgiven. That was a time that it really kind of struck me that The world cannot be such a nice place, and maybe that prepared me. Maybe that's what prepared me. But it kind of woke me up a little bit that you're going to have to toughen up a little bit sometimes. And talk about toughening up. I remember one time I was riding the back of my friend Randy with the raccoon. Randy had a moped, and I was not to be on a motorcycle because my uncle was killed on a motorcycle. And that was a big rule: do not go on motorcycles. Of course, I would go on this. My friend Grape Ape had a motorcycle. My friend Ron had a motorcycle. My friend Steve had a motorcycle. What am I going to do? My friend Randy had a moped, and he was taking me on a ride. And he was kind of a wild guy. He kind of had a, maybe people would call it attention deficit disorder or something, but he had, I think we called him spaz sometimes because he had a lot of energy. And of course, I'm riding on the back of this guy, on the back of this moped with this guy. And as I'm going down the street, I see that the school bus has just um, let off the kids from school, which included my older sister. And my sister was, she's not supposed to know I'm on the back of. So as I'm going about 30 miles an hour, I jump off the moped. And you know what happens when your legs can't keep up with the speed. And I just, just slid on my elbow and my hand, and it was not a pretty sight. And I remember sitting on the curb, just sitting there trying to hold it together, and I'm just bleeding down my arm. And my sister walks up and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And she sees the blood dripping down my arm, and she's the one that patched me up. And I don't remember her telling my parents at all what happened, but that kind of that kind of woke me up a little bit too. So we were always doing stuff like that. We're always jumping off of things and climbing roofs and jumping from one roof to the other and sticking our hand in wax and all that stuff. So one day I was playing next door at the Linker's house, and I think we were playing tag or something. And someone came up running up to me and said, "Hey, there's cops at your house." And we weren't we got in some trouble sometimes, but never with cops. But this time I thought maybe they caught me, someone told or something. And I started getting really scared, like, what is it that I did? I'm in trouble. And I got next door, and relatives were out there, the cop car was there, people were inside the house, outside the house, in the doorway. My uncle, my mom's brother, who was a sheriff, big guy, standing there outside the garage. And everyone, I heard crying inside. And I remember my uncle put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Don't cry, you're the man of the house now." And I remember looking at him like, that's bullshit. And then his son greeted me at the door laughing. And I know it's just the only way that he could know how to handle it, what was happening. And I went inside, and they told me what happened. It was a huge shock. And to think about somebody was there earlier and you're never ever going to see them alive again. It was a huge shock to me. And I remember there was some talk and there was some short counseling, but there wasn't any professional counseling. There wasn't really any come together kind of moment. And after that time, we all kind of sort of went our separate ways. My mom had to learn how to drive because my dad did all the driving. My mom had to get a job because she had a full-time job with kids and my dad was working. So now she had to take care of three kids and learn how to drive and get a job. And then my sister sought refuge with her friends, and they were all part of the Mormon church, so she got involved in the church. And my brother and I got involved with alcohol and pot and just kind of getting in trouble and doing things that boys do. And so we all kind of went our separate ways. And my mom got a job with Penny Saver, and she worked herself up from working penny saver ads into paralegal and into getting degrees and, just kind of moving up the ladder and doing really well. But that was a time that really started to shift our lives. And there was still the decision to be made about, well, should we go on this trip that my mom and my dad had been planning? And my mom was determined to honor my dad's dream and our dream to go on this trip. And she got a lot of flack for that. And there was some flack about um, how to bury my father and, this trip and stuff. And I'm sure it was a huge, difficult time for her. But she continued on and worked and took care of us kids. And we made it through. We're all alive today. So I think that's it for now. I'll carry on what happened after that, after 12 years old, and where we found ourselves after that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this inspires you, helps you, or gets to know me a little bit better, and I'll talk to you later.